What is going on, Colts Nation? And welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Well, guys, it's been a week. I'll just want to say that. Obviously, the Indianapolis Colts losing in heartbreaking fashion on Sunday. And then just a lot of stuff. Obviously, Thanksgiving happening here on Thursday. So it's just kind of been a crazy week in general, guys. So just kind of want to give you a heads up. Obviously, we typically at Derek have a lot more content, but just due to a lot of things that have happened, we just weren't able to get to it a lot. But, we're going to kind of talk about this game moving forward as the Indianapolis Colts head back home here after being on the road for quite a while. The Indianapolis Colts head back home for their first divisional matchup against the Houston Texans. And Derek, the Indianapolis Colts, we talked about how last week, man, that was a must-win game. Like these games, these divisional games especially, man, I tell you what, this is a massive, massive game for the Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah, no doubt. Obviously for the sake of the division, because you not only if you lose this game, you're going to have to go in Jacksonville with the divisional lead on the line. And I think I can stand for every Colts fan when we tell people the last thing you want to do as a Colts fan is have the division on the line and have to go to Jacksonville. Colts haven't won there in over a decade, and no matter how good we've been and how bad the Jacksonville Jaguars have been, it doesn't matter. So the last thing we want is to have to deal with that. And then on top of it, if you're in that situation, Houston, too, also could be within one game of you after that. And they would have a very close divisional record between the two teams as well. So really, Arrowhead obviously was important going into Kansas City. We would love to have been able to win that game. But this one definitely matters as much as anything else.
Absolutely. Yeah. And here's the deal, Derek. 6 games left on the schedule. 4 of those 6 games are AFC South. So this is the start of a massive stretch where you have to win these games. I feel like there still was a little bit of cushion. It's like you cannot afford to drop even 2 of these games of the last 4 in the AFC South. You just can't with, like you said, how really close in striking distance both the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Houston Texans are, and you have to play them both twice still. So still obviously a lot, but this would be a massive start if the Colts are able to get a win here to kind of start this brutal stretch where you're also going to be facing Seattle, who's one of the best teams in football, and San Francisco, who's been a pretty good team as well. So it's definitely going to be a challenge, man, but this is going to be a big one. So we're going to talk about this game, guys, here. But before we do that, just want to say this episode is sponsored by FanDuel. Guys, the Indianapolis Colts come into this game as a little bit of a favorite, negative 215 here against the Houston Texans at home. Colts still favored in the AFC South, negative 220. So there's a lot riding, obviously, like we said, on this game and down the stretch here. But do you think the Colts are going to potentially win this game, or if you think the Colts are going to hold on and win the AFC South, be sure to get on those betting odds right now, guys. Obviously, we talked about it off a very disappointing loss that definitely brought the odds down for the Indianapolis Colts in both those areas. But yeah, definitely going to be a massive one here. But again, guys, check out FanDuel. Shout out to them for sponsoring. So, Derek, let's kind of dive into this matchup, man. Obviously, when we look at the Houston Texans right now, it's been a little bit of hot and cold this year. They started off pretty rough, to begin the year. And just recently, in the last number of weeks, the Houston Texans have been going on a little bit of a winning streak to start to get back into AFC South relevance. And so what has kind of your impressions been, man, of the Houston Texans so far right now, with obviously still a chance, like we mentioned, in terms of the AFC South is concerned. Like we said, the Houston Texans right now, they are currently 6-5, so they're right there with the other 2 AFC South teams. But what's your impression overall, Ben, man, of the Houston Texans so far through this part of the season?
Yeah, you start the season out 0-3, and then you have won 6 of your last 8 games. And even while still, Cody, having an issue where one side of the ball is still not really playing at a high level in comparison to the other. I mean, when you think about the Houston Texans, I mean, obviously a few things stand out. And the number one thing, that defense. I mean, it is by far and away the best defense in the National Football League. It is not close. I know that there are a couple other teams that can do a few more things better than what the Houston Texans typically do, but from an all-around perspective, they get after the quarterback. They control the line of scrimmage at the defensive line. They are really good in their front seven and their back four. So, I mean, there really isn't a spot that you can target them, specifically in the pass game, that anyone has really figured out yet, because they're really, really good at every level. Obviously, you talk about Will Anderson Jr. and Danielle Hunter, who obviously those two edge guys, they're having a great season so far. Derek Stingley, Jalen Petrie, those guys in the back end, those guys can cover anyone, be anywhere at any given time. So, yeah, I mean, of course, this defense, with the way it has played, it will keep Houston in every game. It pretty much has throughout the entirety of this year. Just ultimately, again, when you look at the other side of the ball, it's hard to tell with Houston. What are they going to be? Because they can't run the football insanely well. I think this last week against the Bills was actually one of their more efficient games at running the football. And, I think their running backs ran for around 100 yards. So it very rarely happens for Houston. And then, of course, it's been the play calling and the quarterback play. That's been the big issue, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that here in a minute. But, yeah, I mean, the offense for Houston hasn't quite figured out their identity yet. So you have one side that is elite. The other side, they're still trying to figure themselves out.
Yeah, no doubt. It is kind of like a weird, like the defense's championship caliber, the offense has been not that at all. So it's kind of interesting. And you're like, man, if Houston could even get a halfway decent offense, and that's what they've been doing the last couple of weeks, they've started to win. So, and that makes them dangerous. You mentioned it. I mean, the two edge rushers, I mean, just absolute studs. Will Anderson Jr., obviously, we know Houston traded away a future first round pick to get him, and it obviously is paying off, right? It's paying dividends to, right now he's one of the best edge rushers in the NFL. You pair that with Danielle Hunter, who obviously has always been one of the best edge rushers in the NFL. So that is a dangerous combination for any defense. And we saw what the Bills were able to do with just the constant pressure they got on Josh Allen all the time. Like, it didn't matter, because Houston's pass rush just kept delivering again and again and again, right? And obviously we know, like, Buffalo's offensive line, they were really beat up. There was a lot of issues, but still, like, this has been a consistent thing, man.
I would also go and venture out on the point. I'm not going to discredit Houston's defense for what they did against Josh Allen. The amount of sacks you got on him, clearly great. But I'm going to give credit to the Bills' offensive line and the fact that I think it was 8 sacks that game against Josh Allen. I think they said at least 6 of them were because of Josh Allen. It wasn't because of the offensive line. It was because Josh Allen was rolling out or stepping up into the pressure, and it was his own fault as to why he was getting all these sacks. And instead of throwing the football away or running forward to try to get yardage, instead trying to be Superman. And he wasn't being Superman. He was hurting his team more than he was helping. Again, that's obviously Houston's MO, and that's what Houston got away with. I'm just saying, from an offensive line standpoint, it was more of the fact that it was Josh Allen doing a lot more stupid stuff, which should be hand in hand telling Daniel Jones, hey, listen, don't try to be a hero this week. Don't make it easier for the Houston Texans. Try to help that offensive line as much as you can.
Which makes me think, like, the games the Indianapolis Colts have lost, right? Not all of them, obviously, the Rams game, but the other 2 games, the two most recent games the Colts have lost, they have kind of asked Daniel Jones to do that, right? They have kind of abandoned the run. They've made Daniel Jones throw it a lot more. And the offense has been pretty uneven, honestly, whether it's the turnovers or in last week's case, just you couldn't do anything to sustain drive, right? I mean, I actually felt like the offensive line protected Daniel Jones decently well in that game. They weren't perfect, but I definitely felt like they protected him well than they had in the last couple of weeks. So that's kind of my worry is, are the Colts and Shane Steichen going to be stupid again? And are they going to just, forget you have the best running back in the NFL in your backfield? And that's what I'm concerned about, because both these edge rushers for Houston already have over 10 sacks this year, Derek. That's terrifying to me that they are on that level. And especially, like we said, with Daniel Jones, we've seen him be susceptible at times this year to holding on to the football or to not, just throwing it away to make a bad play worse. We saw it in the Atlanta game multiple times. So I'm just a little bit concerned about that. Not that I don't think the Colts have the tackles, because I think they do have the tackles to be able to help Daniel Jones out. But I think I'm more of like concerned on the Josh Allen front of like, are the Colts going to ask Daniel Jones to do too much? And is Daniel Jones going to not be able to deliver, right? That's what I'm worried about with this defense, as aggressive as they are, because the Colts put it on the shoulders of Daniel Jones last week. And obviously the offense kind of went into a catatonic state in that second half. So I don't know. I am a little bit concerned because this Houston team, this Houston defense, they're better than the Kansas City defense. And if you aren't able to get things going against this Kansas City defense, I don't know how to feel, man, about going against this defense. And like you said, every single level they've got playmakers.
Yeah, and I think there's one thing, there's one catalyst to the Houston defense that you can and should take advantage of, and that is running the football. For a couple reasons. Obviously, you saw James Cook and what he was able to do early on in that game against Houston. Houston, I think they're probably the 12th worst defense in the NFL in yards per game. So, I mean, they're not a great run-stopping defense. Not like they're the worst run-stopping defense in the National Football League, but they're far from the best. So, they have been susceptible to running the football on them from time to time. So if there's one thing you should do, and especially after last week, given the fact that you went away from Jonathan Taylor for whatever reason, and we know typically, Cody, when Jonathan Taylor has a bad game, the next game he usually goes off. And especially against a Houston defense where Jonathan Taylor, I think he averages like 120 yards a game against Houston for his career. So, I mean, it should be that type of game for Jonathan Taylor. It doesn't have to be in the yardage wise, but he needs more than 16 carries. He needs to touch the ball 20 to 25 times in this game, regardless of how much they're actually getting yardage out of him. If you are still getting an average of about 3 to 4 yards a carry, you need to be running the football consistently with Jonathan Taylor in this game, because that is the only way you're going to beat this defense, is if you can get into third and shorts, not third and longs. Because if you get into that situation, Houston's going to come at you hard, and they're going to force you to make a mistake.
Yeah. Well, I will also say, it kind of in defense of Steichen, even though, a lot of people have been piling on him, and I think in certain ways it's warranted, but also, Derek, I need that offensive line. As much as I praise them for protecting Daniel Jones, they need to get their act together in terms of the run game after last week. Yeah. I mean, I understand, like you said, you got to get Jonathan Taylor more touches. Like, I agree with that. But you also weren't able to run the football in critical moments. You weren't able to establish the run on first down, get 3-4 yards. Like, Kansas City was doing a fantastic job on Jonathan Taylor, and this offensive line was kind of getting bullied up front when it came to the run game. So I need this offensive line, in addition to giving Jonathan Taylor more snaps, they need to step it up, man. They need to. Because we know, like, Houston's defensive line, we just talked about them, how good they are. You need your offensive line to rise to the occasions, because if you can't do that and you're going to get one-dimensional, I mean, that's just a recipe for disaster for any team. Like, any team, unless you have a prime Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, it doesn't work. It really doesn't. So you got to be able to run the football efficiently. And also you got to be able to, on the other side, stop the run. And the Colts definitely had some issues last week as well, which we'll get into. But yeah, I definitely think if you're the Indianapolis Colts, you have to establish that run game from a play calling standpoint and also an offensive line standpoint. It has to be a mindset. You have to, go into that game thinking, yeah, Houston's talented, but we're going to dominate. We have the guys up front to dominate. We do. So I think that's got to be kind of the mindset there, and kind of have the passing game, be a little bit of a, every so often throw a wrench in the game plan and stuff. In order to keep the defense honest and whatnot. So I kind of think that needs to be the game plan. You can't do what you did last week because it obviously wasn't efficient. And Shane Steichen even admitted, I have to be a better play caller. He was not a great play caller last week. He admits that fully. And this is a good way to do that, is to take the pressure off your quarterback and your passing game and your offensive line, Derek, who's going to be facing probably the best edge tandem in the NFL. Like, you have to be able to make life easy, like you said, on your offense. Keep yourself in second and third and manageable. If you can do that, yeah, I think you have a great chance to move the football against this Houston defense, right? Because where their strengths? Their strengths are on the outside. Their strengths are the edges. Their strengths are the corners. Now, obviously, they have a little bit in terms of safety as well, but I feel like that's where you need to avoid as much as possible, is the guys that they paid good money to, right? And avoid that as much as possible. And so do what you've done, right? And what's made you successful all year. I think if you can do that offensively, your offensive line can hold up when you have to pass. Your tackles, even if you have to help, one guy like against one of these edge rushers, chip a guy, I don't care. Help Daniel Jones out and figure out a way to, you can't obviously neutralize these guys. They're great players, but as much as you can to chip and help with those guys, I think you have to do that. So I think that's got to be the game plan for the Colts. You mentioned it, run the football. If there's any weakness, and I don't even call it a weakness, but Houston's not elite in stopping the run. I mean, that's to the degree of how good this Houston defense is. They're not a top 5 run defense. And that's what we can say about their weaknesses right now. So
yeah, that's pretty much it. And I mean, and another thing too is, and it's something that I think a lot of people are not really talking about. And another aspect to hopefully the Colts getting back on track offensively is you are finally about to be able to play a game in Lucas Oil Stadium for the first time in over a month. Yes. And I mean, that is a big thing. It really is. I mean, it's home field advantage. It's a much bigger thing in college sports. I get that. But even in the NFL, it definitely is a big help to be there, especially when your team is starting to struggle, at least in one aspect. So obviously the Colts went against Pittsburgh, and then they were in Pittsburgh, and then they had to travel to Germany the next week to play Atlanta, and then had a bye week, and then had to go back on the road to Kansas City. So it has been over a month since the Indianapolis Colts have played in front of their home crowd. I certainly hope Lucas Oil is rocking. I hope Lucas Oil is behind this team still. And if we can get a win and we can start showing some momentum offensively against this Houston team and get a vital win in this circumstance, then it really will be super, super helpful down the stretch. We have really got to make sure that these 3 remaining home games that we're going to get for the remainder of the year, we win those games. We got to win those, because if we don't, we could be in trouble.
Yeah, for sure. And, the good thing about the Colts, if you're looking at just records this year, is the Colts are undefeated at home. So that's certainly good. They've obviously done well again with the home crowd. So hopefully that does continue. But I mean, you're right. With the offense, they've kind of been in a weird funk recently. And it feels like it's a different issue each week. Pittsburgh, it was the turnovers, right? You still were able to move the ball whenever you weren't turning it over, but it's just with the turnovers just killed you in that game. The Atlanta game, it was kind of the, implosions when it came to, some of the crunch time things. You were in Atlanta territory in field goal range. You turned it over multiple times. You had a missed extra point, a missed field goal. This last week, it just felt like you couldn't sustain drives at all, right? Every time you'd get into third down, it felt like you couldn't. I don't know if the Colts put together a single sustained drive that entire game, Derek. And it was very frustrating.
10 first downs the whole game, bro.
Yeah. So you scored a couple times early, But then, right in that second half, you just literally had like, I don't even know, it was like 3 or 4 straight 3-and-outs. It was just ridiculous. You even had an opportunity in overtime, and you still had to go 3-and-out. So, yeah, they got to figure that out, man. And the good thing is, it's not like, I don't want to make excuses, obviously, but it's not like it's a similar thing each week, right? So you're like, okay, hopefully those are just like more of the, you know, exception rather than the rule moving forward. That's what you're hoping for, right? So, and hopefully it evens itself out, right? Because the Colts offense, outside of this week, even though they've had issues with turnovers and whatever, like their offense has still been able to put up good numbers and sustain drives. So you're hopeful that was just an off week when it came to that offensively, and you can, potentially get back to, doing what you've done pretty much all year, and not just against these bad teams, but against some actually like good defenses as well. So you're hopeful that is the case. But we'll move on, Derek, to the defense now. We've talked enough about the offense. I mean, like you said, Houston's offense, man, it's definitely been interesting this year, very up and down. I mean, even last week against Buffalo, like this Houston offense was not looking super great. I know Davis Mills had like a couple games when he filled in for CJ Stroud where he looked actually pretty solid, pretty good. But last week it kind of came back down to earth a little bit for the Houston Texans, and they didn't look great against the Buffalo Bills. All things considered, right? When you look at their offense, they only had 261 yards in total in that game, Derek, and only 153 yards passing, and like you said, 108 yards rushing. So this Houston offense was not the reason they beat the Buffalo Bills at all, right? Like if you think if Buffalo even gets one more score, they win that game because Houston offense was not helping in any capacity. But they are getting CJ Stroud back in this game. Now, here's the deal, though. CJ Stroud, even when he was in, the Houston offense wasn't much better. In fact, it might have actually been worse at times with CJ Stroud out there. But now he's had some time to recover, and so you don't really truly know how he's going to look. But certainly a Houston offense, Derek, that, like we said, they're trying to establish the run a little bit more. They've gotten a little bit better in that department. The last like 4 or 5 games when they've kind of been on this winning streak, they've actually been able to run the football a little bit more effectively. But still, it's nothing crazy, when you look at this Houston team overall. So kind of looking at their offense right now, Derek, I mean, it's been a lot of inconsistencies. They've had flashes, but this isn't the Houston Texans offense that we have been used to seeing over the last couple of years. Talk to me about that.
Well, and the funny part about it is even when Houston started winning some of these games, when they first started their win streak back up, even Texans fans, because I obviously do AFC South Roundtable. I talk with 713 Houston Sports, Ruben, my friend, who covers this team relentlessly. And he tells me all the time that Texans fans, even when the Texans were winning games, fans were saying, Stroud ain't it. Stroud ain't it. Stroud's not it. And even whilst they were winning, they were saying that their quarterback was the biggest issue, and there were some question marks. And obviously, he goes out with a concussion, and Davis Mills comes in. They're still winning games, even in spite of that. And like you said, I mean, while their offense hasn't really imploded at all with Davis Mills, it certainly hasn't looked worse. I think they've cut down on the turnover aspect a little bit with Davis Mills, which obviously comes into play of, Davis Mills as a backup and obviously what the offense is becoming. So, I mean, and I want to ask you too, Cody, before we go any further with it. I mean, honestly, who would you rather face right now? If you're you, who would you rather face right now? Would you rather face CJ Stroud, who's been out off of football for a month because of that concussion? Or do you want to face the backup in Davis Mills right now? It's a legitimate question.
That's a great question. Part of me says it's Davis Mills, but also Derek Davis Mills, like I said, like he actually had some nice performances. Like I don't think CJ Stroud has really had that this year, unless I'm wrong, maybe earlier in the season. But I really feel like Davis Mills, and I've seen this, Derek. I know some people laugh at it, but people were legitimately arguing, should Davis Mills start over CJ Stroud? Like that is to the point to how bad he was playing at times this year. Now, again, you never know coming off of that, how's he going to look, right? But I don't know. It might make more sense, like you said, to get a quarterback who hasn't played football in a month, or an actual game in a month. I don't know.
Yeah,
what do you think?
And I even said that to Ruben too. I was like, why wouldn't you want to play Mills right now? Because he's undefeated as the starter, and he doesn't look any worse than CJ Stroud has all year. As a matter of fact, at times he's looked just as good, if not better. So, I mean, I was like, why not keep Davis Mills keep going in there until they start losing it? I think he told me that Houston has changed some things offensively with their play calling, and Davis Mills sometimes has shortcomings with his arm, and that is where some of those things come into play. And that's why he thinks if CJ Stroud comes back in with the way their play calling is now, he thinks it would benefit CJ Stroud a lot more. It's hard for me to imagine that, though, because obviously we watched CJ Stroud before he got injured, and my God, I mean, that guy. And what sucks is, Cody, I've watched CJ Stroud ever since he came to Ohio State. I mean, some of the throws that brother can make, I mean, he has an NFL arm. I'm certainly not denying it, and anyone else that denies it is just a Buckeye hater. But this year, he has definitely been off. I don't know what it is, but he's been overthrowing guys. He's been underthrowing guys. I don't know. It's a very weird trend, and obviously he's been trending downward for the better part of a year now. I don't know how much play calling is actually going to change that aspect. Either way, I think that we can see CJ Stroud and or Davis Mills put up some good throws against the Indianapolis Colts, even though, the secondary has gotten much better. But it sure sounds like CJ Stroud is expected to clear protocol and start this week. So it'll be interesting to see how he does, because, again, people want to say it all the time that this is just the Colts again, but this is a completely different defensive coordinator this time. This defense looks different than it has in years past.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. So, yeah, I'll be interested to see kind of what that looks like, because they've made some changes, like you said, since CJ Stroud has been out. So does that lead to any more success? Because it's not like last week the Houston Texans offense looked great, right? It's not like they've just been absolutely unstoppable. So you're like, how much truly could they have changed since CJ Stroud was in there, right? And so how much will that benefit CJ Stroud, or will it at all? That'll be something I'm definitely curious about. But yeah, like you said, this Colts defense, I mean, certainly from a year ago to now, completely different from the defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo to some of the personnel they've added, especially in their secondary. I mean, pretty much an entirely new secondary outside of one from last year. So I am really interested to see, how that does look. And look, Derek, I know, I was frustrated at the end of that game with, first off, Charvarius Ward allowing a 3rd and long right in overtime for Kansas City to go down and get that, which I'm like, dude, we're paying you that money. There's a couple of plays where I'm just frustrated at that. But yeah. I also acknowledge the fact that he was returning, which, he hadn't played in a while. Secondly, your defense was on the field for so long. You're like, eventually,
for literally 2/3 of that game.
Yeah. Right. So while the defense I had issues with at times and situational stuff, I do fully admit that if your offense was halfway competent in that game in the second half, your defense plays a lot better, right? So it kind of goes both ways there. No matter how talented your defense is, if your offense is routinely going 3 and out, eventually it's going to happen, especially against Patrick Mahomes, who we know is having a pretty good season himself, and he's one of the best quarterbacks, if not the best quarterback in football still. So, all that to say, I was frustrated with that. But, Derek, I do think this defense is on a good trajectory. I do feel like now that your defense is pretty much healthy, and obviously you hope, in a couple weeks here you get DeForest Buckner back. But this on paper, and again, on paper doesn't mean jack crap unless you do something about it. But on paper, you look at this Colts defense and you say they should have a good opportunity to hold this Houston offense in check. Now, my biggest thing, what we talked about with the run game, is the Colts, frankly, they did not do a great job against Kansas City when they ran the football, right? They did not. Kareem Hunt ran all over them in this game, and in critical moments, Kareem Hunt did whatever he wanted, right, in this game. So I'm curious about that with Woody Marks and Nick Chubb. Can this Colts defense have a bounce back, right? Can they figure it out? How much will Houston try to establish that run, and how much will they try to pass it? I don't know. Well, what are your thoughts just overall on this revamped Colts defense, what we've seen, last week, and, moving forward, looking at Houston and their offense, which, like we said, been really hot and cold. What do you think of this matchup?
Yeah, Houston and Indianapolis have had a great deal of back and forth when it comes to running the football. In recent memory, the Colts defense has done a pretty good job of keeping Houston's run game in check for the most part. But, last year we saw obviously what they were able to do last year in our own building. That defense was just terrible that year. And you're right. This time around, with DeForest Buckner not being there, I mean, I would give credit to the Colts defense in the fact that, when we didn't have him against Atlanta, I thought even though Bijan had 80 yards rushing, Bijan really didn't influence the game much in the running category. He didn't really have a great influence in that game. Obviously, Houston is going to try to make this as two-dimensional as they possibly can, because if you make it one-dimensional, I don't even think right now Houston wants CJ Stroud to have to be the hero in a situation where the offense has struggled all year. And partially the reason why I think it struggled for most of the year is they haven't been able to run the football. I mean, Joe Mixon being gone is huge. Losing a bunch of offensive linemen this offseason and not replacing those guys with any caliber talent is also worse. Obviously, against the Bills, they did a fairly good job of running the football. It wasn't like they were it's not like they were absolutely destroying the Bills running the football, but they were able to get themselves in much better situations and score more frequently offensively because their defense was putting them in a good situation. They were able to run the football a little more, so Davis Mills didn't have to be a hero. And that is certainly what they'll lean on again. They'll hope that with this Colts defense that certainly can struggle stopping the run, they're going to definitely try to make it better on themselves. If they can get into those third and shorts, then CJ Stroud can definitely take advantage of those situations. But I am curious to see how this secondary stacks up against this Houston passing game, because obviously it's mainly been Nico Collins or virtually nothing. I will say this: Jaden Higgins has done a fantastic job as a rookie, stepping in for the plethora of injuries that the Houston Texans have had to deal with. But yeah, I mean, if you can put sauce on Nico, or you can even get Charvarius over there too, if you can just keep Nico from going insane, then you're going to force them to have to go somewhere else with the ball. And I like our chances with that right now if we're able to do that.
Right. It feels like it's Nico Collins and then a bunch of young guys, right? That's what it really feels like at this point. Obviously, we know Dalton Schultz, the tight end. He's always a solid player, but he's clearly not like one of the best tight ends in football, but he's always like been a solid, reliable tight end. So that's certainly something that we know the Colts struggle in. So maybe they try to get Dalton Schultz the football. We'll have to see on that. But you're right. Like, I think whoever you feel like has the best chance skill set wise against Nico Collins, right? You have him. I don't even think you need to shadow. I think you just have whoever's on his side just guard him, right? And you feel pretty good about that overall, right? So, yeah, and again, Nico Collins has burned the Colts multiple occasions. So, truly, like, he is the biggest threat on this Houston offense, and there's really no debate about it. So, if you're able to, figure out a way to neutralize him and take him away, like all good defensive coordinators do, then you're right. You're going to have to force CJ Stroud in this offense to figure out other ways to beat you. And frankly, there haven't been a lot of other ways that Houston has beat teams this year offensively. So
yeah, exactly.
But again, I say that and they'll probably have some random guy go, but whatever.
It would be our luck.
Right. But seriously though, like Nico Collins is this offense passing the football when it comes to the wide receivers. There's a lot of young guys right now that Houston's going to obviously deploy out there, but we'll just have to see. But Nico Collins, clearly the biggest threat on this offense. And if you can take him away and you force CJ Stroud to have to find other guys, that's only a recipe for good things for you. You feel like, okay, like that's what you want, right? So yeah, that's definitely going to be good. And then I think, Derek, when it comes to just the pass rush, right? I feel like the pass rush, we've talked about it. Pass rush has been very inconsistent this year. While it certainly had a few moments against Patrick Mahomes, there also was time when you felt like when you rush 4, it doesn't always go super well. You don't get a ton of pressure, right? And it's definitely something that I think when you go to the offseason, you just seriously look at and figure out ways to address it. Because right now it seems like it's Latu, especially with DeForest Buckner out. It's Latu or bust. Like, it kind of feels that way. Unless, of course, you bring like Zaire Franklin or Kenny Moore off the blitz or something like that, right? It does feel like right now you truly don't have a ton of options at getting after the quarterback consistently. And that's been a continuous issue this year.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, you're right. Latu definitely has been the most consistent guy getting after the quarterback this year for the Indianapolis Colts. I mean, I'm just hoping that somebody on that defensive line is going to be able to take advantage the inexperience that the Houston offensive line entails. You know, I mean, again, you've struggled against some other teams, but I mean, this is definitely going to probably be the worst offensive line you're going to face for the remainder of the year. So if there were any time that you were going to get pressure on a quarterback that's been struggling this year with an offensive line that's not been good this year, this would be the one to do it.
Yeah, and especially like we talked about, like if you feel like you have whichever corner out there and you feel like you can live with him being one-on-one with Nico Collins, it's going to allow you, like we talked about last week, to be able to send pressure, be able to be exotic, be able to confuse your quarterback, like do all those things. And I think if you're able to do that, then obviously you're going to be able to get off the field a lot more and give your offense more opportunities. So I think you have the personnel to do it. It's just like, will you do it? Will you mix things up? Will you make life complicated? Because Derek, this is the first year that Lou Anarumo's had to face C.J. Stroud with the Colts. So I'm curious, in his first game, what does that game plan look like?
Right.
All right, cool. Well, I think we can do some game predictions here, and then we can call it good here. So what do you got, Derek, for this game?
I think this will be a lower scoring affair. I think it'll be a final score of 23-17 Indianapolis.
Okay. All right. Well, since Indianapolis is still undefeated at home, I'm going to take those odds. I do agree. I think we're going to see a lower scoring game because both these defenses, I think, are pretty good right now, even without DeForest Buckner. Like, I do think it'll be a lower scoring game, but ultimately it will come down to, can the Colts, stud players on offense outperform the players you would label as studs on this Houston offense, right? Who's going to make a couple more plays in this game? Because I do think field position is going to be massive, just like that Kansas City game. And if your offense can figure a few things out and get back to what we know they're capable of this year, like, I just think it's going to be something where Indianapolis, frankly, I just think they have more talent offensively. Like, I know Nico Collins is the best receiver in this game, but other than that, Colts have the advantage in pretty much every other category offensively. So I'm like, even if you get another, possession or two where you're kicking a field goal, like, this is a game where, Derek, I think field goals are fine. Like, I was not happy with that against Kansas City, but this is a game where I'm like, okay, I think
do not be aggressive on this team.
Don't be stupidly aggressive, right? Like, you
don't be stupid aggressive on this team. Do not.
Right. So with that in mind, I'm going to say 20-17 Indianapolis. I think it's going to be a low scoring game. I think the defenses are going to have their moments, but I think Indianapolis ultimately pulls it out just narrowly at home.
Nice.
All right, cool. Well, that'll do it for this one, guys. Let us know your thoughts. Again, shout out to FanDuel. Be sure to go check them out, guys. Let us know your score predictions in the comments down below. I'm not sure exactly when this is going to be coming out, but in the event that it does come out on Thursday, happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Hope you stay safe. Hope you have fun. All that good stuff. Hope you eat a lot of good food with friends or family or whoever you are celebrating. We do appreciate you for supporting us again. Sorry, guys, this week's kind of been weird with everything, and we just haven't been able to get as much content as we usually do. So appreciate everybody understanding, but that'll do it for this one. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We greatly appreciate it. And as always, guys, go Colts.